The title of this video has the word fascism in it. This groomer panic absolutely has to do with fascism. For one thing, a lot of the narratives used in the groomer panic map perfectly to those embraced by the fascist right throughout history. The classic fascist narrative is always about a once great society presently in a state of decline at the hands of an internal threat. In our case, the US needs to be made great again, and is under threat by woke ideology promoted by LGBT parents and teachers. These enemies are always aided by the socialist left, hence the attention to woke leftists in our current groomer panic. And the state is almost always depicted as simultaneously ineffectual and in cahoots with the conspiracy. The reason that this panic excites these same triggers is that heteronormativity, white supremacy, and the nuclear family are the foundations of the society fascists wish to uphold. All are brought into question by the acceptance of the LGBTQ community and the increased visibility and contesting of racism. This reckoning is therefore viewed by the far right as destabilizing, and thus it demands violent retaliation in order to protect the nation. In this case, embodied by the next generation, and these principles of white supremacy, heteronormativity, and the nuclear family. But it's more than just a similar narrative. This moral panic has mobilized literal fascists. Whether or not you personally consider this moral panic to have anything to do with fascism, fascists do. In response to this groomer narrative, far-right militias have assumed a sort of vigilante role, and are intimidating those targeted by the rhetoric, showing up armed to drag brunches, reading groups, and various pride events, causing many to shut down, and getting more and more people to fear for their lives. So-called lone wolves with far-right beliefs are also a part of that equation. Less organized, but equally culpable in making LGBTQ spaces less safe and going beyond just threats. And if that wasn't enough, it's not just militias or individual actors participating in this effort. In Florida especially, but increasingly all over the country, state power has been marshaled to enact more and more policing of the LGBTQ community to complement what militias and lone wolves are doing. And if a shared narrative and the literal involvement of fascists weren't enough for you, there is an almost one-to-one Nazi analogy to link fascism with the current groomer panic. In Nazi Germany, the terms Jugendverführer and Jugendverderber, meaning seducer and corrupter of youth respectively, were used by the Nazis to demonize queer people. According to one historian, this trope depicted, quote, a uniquely dangerous figure who lured normal young men into depravity, and thus spread the epidemic of homosexuality. A lot of commonalities there already, but let's read a little further. In 1934, the rumor that homosexual cliques planned to seize power took hold, giving homosexuals another identity as enemies of the state. And as you can probably already predict, the wave of persecution that followed was dramatic and deeply animated by this rhetoric, and became one of the many tools that Nazi fascists used to develop their policing power. Queer people were sent to concentration camps wearing this pink upside-down triangle. They were imprisoned, and all manner of other sorts of violence were used by the Nazi Party and their sympathizers to stamp out of German society a so-called homosexual personality. Like today, the goal was not to eliminate all LGBT people, but to make their visible presence unacceptable by brutal violence, so that those who ever exhibited any trace of queer behavior, whatever that means, could be ruthlessly targeted. If you somehow don't feel concerned by this horrifying moment we're living in, consider this. Fascism requires an outgroup on which to pin the blame for all of society's woes. If tomorrow the narrative of trans grooming becomes ineffective, either because their repression will have become so totalizing or because the public will have moved on, there are plenty of other people left under the woke umbrella for the far right to focus its efforts on. It has proven it can be mobilized by this rhetoric into acts of violence. There is little reason to believe it won't be mobilized again against someone else it considers to be part of the threat on Western civilization. The rest of the LGBTQ community could be first up on the list, but attention could equally quickly shift to immigrants, socialists, Black Americans, non-traditional women, and the list can go on forever. Woke can mean roughly anything, and can be made infinitely dystopian, so anyone on the left of Tucker Carlson and any group resisting established modes of persecution can become a target. Fascism has rarely ever appeared fully formed. It takes time for the apparatus of evil to gain critical momentum. But we are already seeing its symptoms, and many people are already feeling the jackboot.